getting these things in here. And I've been slammed with shit, with
Yeah.
I mean with this podcast stuff, sometimes it's getting out of control with some of this like I have people like I had like all these children's authors and shit reaching out to me. I'm like, okay, I'm not doing children's authors anymore. Like
Yeah.
because it's too
Yeah.
much and they're too bad and they don't really it's not quite the same. Like they don't quite care about the stuff that, serious writers really.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh,
I get a lot of emails from like random
yeah.
publicists and stuff. And
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Like I know what they're trying to do and it's no, I get it, but I'm my thing is after, especially at old pod, I've been doing this now like 5 or 6 years, podcasting stuff, and it's just like if I don't already kind of know you, then we're not going to do it. Like from Twitter or something else, just no. There's enough
Yeah.
people I know. I'm sort of in my network at this point. I don't need random people. I say that until like a big author hits me up at
Right.
some point. Then, you know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Heavy,
Bored.
heavy,
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No!
resources,
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so.
This is Andrew Whitstead, and you were listening to Heavy Bored, and we're recording this on November 4th, 2025. My guest today is Brad Kelly. Brad is an author, an engineer, and a podcaster. His debut novel is titled House of Sleep, available on Amazon, and of course, linked below, listeners. His latest novel is set to come out next year in 2026. He hosts the Method and Madness podcast, a unique literary podcast experience where Brad interviews authors and fellow literary and art enthusiasts, but also includes in-depth discussions of classic and contemporary literature, readings of some of Brad's favorite texts, and much more. He co-founded and co-hosted the Art of Darkness podcast. He publishes his fiction regularly at bradkellyesque.com. And Brad has extensive experience in the various publishing markets available to authors in the 21st century. He's gone through the self-publishing coliseum. He's gone through small and indie presses, and he's published directly to Substack and other websites. And he's a great follow on Twitter, which is where I first encountered him and his work. Brad graduated with his MFA from the University of Texas at Austin. He's a tarot practitioner and enthusiast, regularly performing tarot readings for clients and friends alike. But more importantly, listeners, Brad is an upstanding member of the literary community. And I mean that in the fullest sense of the phrase. Brad promotes and encourages writers regularly, many of them underpraised and underpromoted. He's built several niche communities for writers and art enthusiasts, and he's incredibly generous with his time and platforms. That is all to say, listeners, that I admire Brad for his passion, his commitment, his relentless work ethic, and I'm proud to call myself, dare I say, a peer of his in this current state of the literary world. Brad Kelly, thank you so much for coming on Heavy Board.
Thank you, man. That was great. That's the best intro I've ever had. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll try not to let it go to my head.
No, yeah, I meant it. Yeah, I did. I think it's something that isn't talked about now either, in terms of the kind of, you hear it when you're in MFAs and all of that, but the literary citizen, right? Or
Mm.
literary community, this type of thing. And I'm just like, the person when I think of that, I'm just like the person who I see every day doing it. I was like, it's Brad
Oh, thanks, man.
doing
Yeah.
it. Yeah, for sure, dude. And it's as you know, it's a labor of love here. Yeah, there's not a lot of reward for being a good literary citizen, and
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's just you see I guess part of the thing is like I try to do the thing that people have helped me out along the way a lot.
Right.
And I'm very much like a pay it forward kind of person. So it's sort of like, when somebody does something for you and there's nothing you can do for them, uh, then you got to try to do that for somebody else. That's kind of the way I see things. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I said, yeah, we're happy to have you on here. It's overdue, really, man. Overdue. I've been meaning to
yeah.
have Brad on for many times, listeners. And we have a companion podcast. There's episodes with me and Brad on Art of
Mhm,
Darkness, on Method and Madness. So go
mhm.
listen to those, listeners. They'll be linked below as well. But Brad, the first question, as always, you have to deal with the heavy board treatment. It's always,
Okay.
what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? What did your parents
Yeah.
do? How did these early years form Brad Kelly?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the far northern suburbs of Detroit, sort of the edge of the suburbs. The people who are familiar with 8 Mile Road from the Eminem movie, I grew up on 23 Mile Road, and 24 Mile Road was dirt when I grew up. So right there at the very, very far edge of what you could consider the Detroit metropolitan area. And so, it's very working class kind of town, sort of lower middle class up to upper middle to lower middle class to middle class, I would say. Uh, and My dad was my parents grew up way up in the thumb. I was just telling this story to somebody the other day that I'm technically baloney royalty. And what that means is my parents are from a town that is known as the bologna capital and has an annual bologna festival. My, I think it's my mom's like great grand uncle or something started the whole bologna thing in this little town up in the thumb of Michigan. And she was the bologna queen her senior year of high school. So I'm bologna royalty, which, there's not a lot of cachet to that, but uh, and so they grew up sort of fairly rural community. My dad grew up working on the farm, got drafted into Vietnam, had a combat role in Vietnam, came home and started working for Chrysler factories, worked for Chrysler until his retirement. Uh, and it wasn't a very literary environment, I must say. There wasn't a ton of books. My mother read to us, read children's books and stuff to us. It wasn't sort of frowned upon necessarily, but when I started to get, I started reading adult books when I was in like third grade or something like that. You move from, I jumped right from like Bernstein Bears to like Michael Crichton and Stephen King, kind of, and I didn't stop anywhere in between, really. And That was kind of odd and unusual. And My obsession with all things literary didn't make a whole lot of sense. But I had a couple teachers along the way who, I guess, they at least saw that I could form a sentence. I could write a coherent sentence. And so were very encouraging and would occasionally sort of make suggestions or slip me things to read and that sort of stuff. And I actually had a teacher in high school who was very encouraging in a specific way. So he's my English teacher, and I want to say 10th grade. And he was a amateur bodybuilder. He did bodybuilding competitions, and he was a fisherman. And the thing that was good about that is like, if you're in the American public education system, all your English teachers are going to be women, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then when you get this jacked, hyper masculine dude who's also thinks books and novels are important, for somebody like me, it was like, oh, okay. So like I don't have to, in my sort of pubescent forming mind, I didn't have to like it could be you didn't have to it wasn't emasculating to be reading a novel in any way.
Right.
It was like, and that was actually, in hindsight, I didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, that was actually, I think, kind of gave me license on some level to kind of go as into it as I wanted to. Um, so yeah, it was childhood, a little difficult. There was sort of unresolved PTSD swimming around my house. As I mentioned, my dad was, a Vietnam veteran, and had its that made itself known for sure. But kind of got out of the house without too much trouble and trauma, I suppose. Uh, had a pretty intense rebellious phase for sure. Had some legal trouble when I was a teenager more than once. Uh, and yeah, yeah. Got out of there, went to college, and then went to college in downtown Detroit or Midtown Detroit, I guess more properly speaking, and then left Michigan and swore I was never coming back. And of course, I did come back, but it took a while.
Yeah, for sure. When you growing up there, like outside of Detroit, were you said your dad literally worked for Chrysler. Like, did you get to see
Mhm.
like basically like the peak of the U.S. auto industry and then the decline, especially in that city? I mean, you got to like live through
Yeah, for
like
sure, for
that's pretty
sure.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah, there was always like this looming thing that he might get laid off.
Right.
And he just sort of it just sort of never happened for him. He
Hmm.
kind of danced between the raindrops, I guess. But yeah, like that definitely was a kind of a specter. You kind of knew that, you know, if the auto industry goes even way up where we were. I mean, I don't even know if most of, a lot of my friends were also their dads worked in
Right.
the auto industry in one capacity or another, and so you could feel that kind of holding the whole community together for sure. So yeah, yeah, and watching Detroit, the city of Detroit, sort of transmogrify over time too. I mean, it was always kind of scary, at least during my lived memory, because I was born in the '80s, and that's when crack cocaine was at its absolute height. So it was a scary place, and it still is, but there's a sort of rejuvenated downtown core now, at least that people can take pictures of and say, "Isn't this place great?" Um,
Gentrification. Yeah, is that happening?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting in Detroit, gentrification is like I don't know how I feel about it, but in Detroit it's like um the places that get gentrified are like three-quarters abandoned. So is
Right.
that gentrification when it's
Right.
like a wasteland? It's not quite the same necessarily. It's like yeah, these places were dying. And at some point in the 2000s, a bunch of trust fund kids started moving in. But yeah.
The American dream. Yeah,
Yeah.
so great childhood. I mean, the question off of that too, I always ask this, and you and I have talked about this before in terms
Mhm.
of like the millennial childhoods, like even with things that are like, yeah, dad having issues with PTSD and kind of always on the kind of looming layoff thing. You still have this kind of suburban, as a kid,
Oh
you don't
yeah.
notice that stuff and you're just kind of
Right.
going to school and all of that. And I want to talk to you
Yeah.
about bodybuilding and all that as well. Is that
Okay, sure.
an
Yeah,
enthusiast, let's
yeah, I could
say, of that.
yeah, I get
Yeah,
after
yeah,
it a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we'll get into that too. But the
Yeah.
next question is always, when did reading and writing come into your life? You said it was kind of high school, you kind of at least
Yeah.
seriously, or yeah,
Yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it was before that. I like first, second grade, I started making comic books with my friends, which, to me, there was a continuum of going from that into like writing stories. So that was literally elementary school. And I remember my mother was a sort of an admin assistant for the local natural gas company. And so I remember at one point, I must have been second grade. She brought a typewriter home from work just to like let me play on it, basically, because she saw me like writing little science fiction stories and on sheets of construction paper. And so I remember that and banging away on it and trying to figure it out. And at some point, like fourth or fifth grade, we got a computer in the house, and I realized that I needed to learn how to type. Like that was really important. And I played Mavis Beacon and all of that stuff. So it came in pretty early, but because it wasn't like a literary household, and I didn't really have much beyond like the sort of standard educational what's sort of presented to you, you kind of just reach out to like whatever you can and grab onto like whatever you can. I remember reading Huckleberry Finn in some kind of, it was an unabridged edition, but it was definitely like marketed to children, just like based on
Right.
the size of it and the cover and all of that. I remember reading that and being amazed by it. And yeah, and then just like gradually finding other stuff. And then probably when I was around, probably like my biggest thing, I have an older brother. He's like 4 to 5 years older than me. And when we when I was like 12 or so, my dad would start taking me hunting with him, and I don't have anything against hunting. It's totally fine, but I didn't, especially at that age, I didn't care for it. It didn't like
Yeah,
it
having to get
didn't
up at
do
4
any.
a.m. and sit in the cold and wait. Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
the
yeah, it
most
didn't.
fun thing for like an 8-year-old. Yeah.
Right. It didn't do anything for me. And so I would smuggle and how we hunted was my dad had there was some I don't know, it was like 40 acres. It was the back of a farming lot that was sort of in the family. And we would drive up there. It was like an hour, 45 minutes from home. We would go up there and hunt. And we had these two like permanent tree stands that had been there for who knows how long. And my dad would go sit in one and I would go sit in another one. And so I'd be just by myself in the woods and I would smuggle a book all the time. And I started taking the books that my brother was getting assigned at school. So like, and it was the standard fare of 1984 and
Right.
Brave New World and Scarlet Letter and whatever, the standard stuff that you get assigned in high school. And I would take those and read them in the tree stand. And it's, you get a good like 2, 3 hours straight reading. There's really nothing else to do. And I just ignore the deer walking by me. And um, uh, and then when I got to high school, I had already read all of it, which was interesting. So I went to the same school he did, the same teachers he had. Every book they assigned, I'd read it a couple years before. And at that point, I kind of felt like I got permission from some of the teachers, sort of, to just, not read it or read something else. And then I started kind of expanding my horizons, and I would just go to the literature section in the local bookstore, and I would just get a book that was I'd heard the name of the author before, and I might not know anything about it. So, yeah, so that was kind of how that all worked for me.
Yeah, it's interesting that too with kind of the millennial childhood with like, when you're discovering books, they had all those programs. And I mean, I'm sure they still have them now. My daughter's too young to like be in it. But and your kid is probably old enough where they have like the kind of like uh like sneaks or whatever, like the reading stuff at the library, like where you had like
Hmm.
the kind of summer reading challenges
Yep.
and you would like log your reading and stuff and they would always have all these books and stuff like kind of like a curated list of like get into these and yeah, it was everything from like kids books to like yeah, kind of the what they would call young adult now. And it
Right. Right.
seems weird calling like Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer young adult because it's not quite what it is now, but like
Yeah.
yeah, you could read that at the age of 10, 11 and figure out
Yeah.
and really
Yeah,
get something out of it.
a reasonably literate kid can figure out Huck Finn in like sixth grade for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
be moved by it, not just the
Mhm.
adventure, but be moved by the relationships and all of that. Yeah, like
Right.
all of that stuff. So that's fantastic. You say that, listeners, it coming in at a young age, as most writers have, they kind of it finds you no matter what. If you're
Yeah.
interested, whether you have, parents that are shoving it down your throat, or you're just like wandering around a library because you're curious. I mean, it's just interesting how that plays out. You always find it. And going off
Yeah,
that, Brad,
absolutely.
the next question is always, what were some of the first writers you were enamored with, or, your go-to inspirations, idols in the world
Yeah.
of letters? What would you say? And anything goes, anything goes for
Right.
this.
Yeah, probably the biggest like early on the biggest was Stephen King. I started reading Stephen King like third or fourth grade, and I was super into comic books before that, but like I never it somehow, this may sound weird, but as at that age it somehow never registered to me that somebody was writing these comic books and that it was
Right.
like it might be like a specific guy that had a vision, it was just kind of like a thing that showed up. But somehow I got into reading Stephen King, and like then it sort of registered to me like, oh, this is a person who sits down and they do the thing, and so that one was big because, and I probably modeled like some really really early short stories off of stuff that I'd read in Stephen King. And then the next big one for me was Jack Kerouac, who I will always sort of love and respect on one level because of that, because it sort of got me into it. But I also like kind of see from a writing standpoint that there really isn't that much interesting in it to me anymore. Um,
Right.
but it meant a lot to me at like 14, 15. Jack Kerouac meant a ton to me. And then probably like the other, if there's like a making sort of a triangle here, is Franz Kafka. I don't know why, but at some point I realized I needed to read Franz Kafka and was just it totally it totally changed what I thought you could even like do with the art form. It totally made it opened like up a whole new corridor of like yeah, I mean, people, it's, everybody knows Franz Kafka's work at this point, but really rang a bell for me and made a ton of sense. And then that just opened up all kinds of stuff. And it was like, oh, wait, this guy's been dead for whatever, 100 years or 75 years or whatever. Like, oh, there's a whole library of stuff that's, in my perspective, is ancient, that's interesting and is a place that you can go and find some inspiration and find cool stuff. So, yeah, I would say early on it was those three were sort of my idea of what a writer is.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you any particular ones by Stephen King or anything that you remember that were like, oh
Yeah.
wow?
Yeah, I remember the first one I ever read in third grade was Misery.
Yeah.
And I, my parents, interestingly, here was an interesting thing about having parents who were not particularly literary and didn't read a lot. They didn't seem to grok that books could be very much for adults. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think in their head it was like, well, if he understands it, I guess that's good, you know?
Yeah.
But, meanwhile, I don't know that children should necessarily be reading Misery at whatever, 8 years old. It's a lot of pretty heavy, violent imagery for sure. So yeah, I would say Misery and then the first three books in the Dark Tower series and The Stand. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I read The Stand in elementary school and was totally blown away by it. So yeah, I would say those three.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, King is so important. And I mean, listeners hear me talk about it all the time too. Is like he
Mm,
doesn't get because he writes genre stuff, whatever, but not always. But because of that, he
mhm,
doesn't quite get his day in court with
mhm.
grappling with how much he influenced the literary side of things. People don't like to admit how much he's influenced the literary side of things
Yeah.
specifically. Of course, he influenced the genre side, and there's millions of writers trying to write like him and his style and all of that, like he would
Mhm.
do. And honestly, sometimes like I always the reason I stress this, and you know this, Brad, I mean like because when you're reading through some of that stuff, you'll come across the sentence or something in a Stephen King novel where you're just like, that's a beautiful little phrase. Like that's a
Yeah,
beautiful like the guy's a writer,
he
despite him
is. Yeah.
choosing to do this, the
Yeah.
horror stuff.
I
Yeah.
mean, he's a great storyteller. The
Right.
stories,
Yeah.
he's got all the mechanics are down. Like you could do a lot worse than to start with him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way the backstory, he's really good at that, at kind of taking the little kernel and weaving it through a whole novel and coming back at the end. That is craft out the ass, man.
Hmm.
Like that is
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
is literary
Yeah.
craft. Kara, what were the big ones on the road, stuff like that
Yeah,
when you're like a
on the
teenager?
on the road was big for sure. Dharma Bums was
Oh
also
yeah.
big for me. Those were probably also a little bit more influential on like how I lived my life to a certain extent,
Oh yeah.
especially maybe, like Stephen King doesn't really give you much in that regard, but like on the road was very much like uh gave me a taste of like what it might be to be bohemian in some sense. And yeah, I lived pretty bohemian. I took a fairly bohemian approach for quite even still, but in those days much more like uh I would play around with like hitchhiking around my little town, stuff like
Yeah.
that. It seems kind of silly in hindsight, but I was trying to figure something out. And yeah, the idea, the sort of freewheeling idea, there's a sort of different kind of America that Kerouac is was getting at, and to me, it had like a lot of redeeming qualities. I mean, there was something about restoring or keeping alive like some kind of ribald, freewheeling American lifestyle despite the encroaching modernization of everything. So yeah, probably the two biggest ones for me were probably On the Road and Dharma Bums for sure.
Yeah.
But I
And
shoot, I haven't read them in 30 years, 20
right.
some years, you know. I don't even know what they're like. I don't even know what they're like anymore, you know. I don't know what I would think if I cracked one open now.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. And I've said this before in other places where I just, it's interesting to me. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it's like, yeah, something like Kerouac, where there's the prose, and then there's
Mhm.
the kind of the idea, the kind of like the Americana freedom, hopping trains, roaming around, just kind of living every day to the fullest in this kind of free way that very romantic, and like I like
Mhm.
that aspect, like very alluring to especially a young
Right.
man kind of, yeah, reading those things and just kind of be like, oh, you can just hop on a train. And
Yeah.
then like, yeah, I had a friend in college who would just do that. And back
Mhm.
when I was in college, I mean, like, there weren't like trains like there were in Kerouac's day. They were all just, cargo carrier trains. What are they, like a CTX or something? What was the name?
Right.
The big
Right.
carriers that go through the cities. So this train that would go through Baltimore, the last one that only still goes is just like a cargo train that comes through,
Mhm.
every couple of days or whatever. And he would just hop on it and like ride it up to Philly or something and just
Yeah.
like hop off. And I was always too scared to do it, but I would always just be
Yeah.
like, that's like what the Kerouac thing is. It's just like, let's just hop
Right.
the train, bro.
Let's
Go to
go.
Philly for
Let's just
free.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just go.
Don't worry about where you're staying. Don't worry about where you're staying tonight, whatever. You'll figure it out. It'll all kind of work out. And there was a certain kind of masculinity to that stuff too.
Yeah.
It was sort of different than the Hemingway masculinity, maybe, but there was something about that where it was like, I mean, yeah, just take a chance. What are you gonna like, you'll be all right.
It was almost the
Um,
sensitive young man kind of way. Like he was like Kerouac was like a sensitive young man, but also a rebel. It's weird how those are tied together in a way.
hmm.
Like the kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, love of art and then this love of kind of rebellious freedom. This, I don't know. It's very alluring, very
Right.
important. Yeah. So that,
Hmm.
yeah, just crazy, crazy how that. And I wanted to ask, what got you into going off of all of that? What got you into tarot and the kind of the occult thing? How did you get started on that?
Yeah, I mean that's a cool question. So, when I was getting my MFA, I I went on a date with this girl who gave me a tarot reading, and I didn't think much of it at the time. I was probably starting to come out of my like Richard Dawkins atheist phase at that point.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
when she gave me a tarot reading, it was mostly like I'm on a date, like and she reads tarot. This is cool, whatever. I didn't think much of it. And then she gave me a tarot reading, and I was I was surprised by how well it worked. And I didn't really know what to make of that. The fact that it seemed to like kind of be right on, and I just met this person, and it made a lot of sense to me. And even though there is an element of it that's like, when you read like when you like if you like an astrology, and I'm not d disparaging astrology necessarily, but like you can go into reading the descriptions of any one of the things and be like, that's me. And then the one you actually are always jumps out at you more, and it's because your brain's applying yourself to it, right? So even accounting for that sort of phenomena, I was still like, man, this is not only like it seemed to work, like this is actually interesting to me as a system. Like how she knew all these cards meant, and she was tying it all together. And then it took me a few years before I decided that I was gonna like take do anything about it myself, that I might just like try to learn it myself. And then I bought a deck probably 2013 or 2014. And then I just got obsessed with it. I would spend like a half an hour to an hour every day processing card meanings, at first pulling a card out and then looking up the meaning and then reading books on it. And eventually, I probably did that for about 9 months to a year before I started trying to do readings for other people. And yeah, and I just ended up loving it. I mean, I love the system in it. I love the imagery and symbolism of it. I love the literature and sort of philosophy around it. I love it as this like open receptacle that allows other religious systems to sort of like it doesn't necessarily contradict anything. A lot of you'll be on the internet and you'll see a lot of like people a lot of the sort of stalwart Christians that you find on Twitter will sort of disparage it as like this evil witchcraft. And it's like some of the most important books for me about tarot were written by people who were maybe slightly heretical, but were effectively Christians. And so it like when I see that, I'm always like, well, you don't actually know what the tarot is. It doesn't really contradict anything
Yeah.
necessarily in any particular religion, and it's open enough that I mean you could come into it with sort of Hindu ideas. It's got Jewish elements to it. It's kind of all over the map, and it doesn't necessarily contradict or refute any particular religious claim. It's a very open system, and I like quite a lot. And then I
I
found it
don't know.
as you go
No,
ahead.
please.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I just, I don't know anything about it. How old is that kind of system, like the tarot system or anything like
Yes.
that?
Yeah, so the cards, I mean, there's and I will talk about it, but if anybody is really interested, I do on my Method and Madness channel, I have a history of the tarot. It's a pretty deep dive. It's about 45 minutes or 50 minutes long, kind of where it started and all that. I mean, the roots of it go back to like I think like 200 AD, 400 AD in the Mamluk dynasty. There's stuff that came out of Egypt, and there's also some stuff from Chinese card systems.
Right.
But you really start to see the first beginning of what we would start to recognize as the tarot in right basically at the end of the Black Plague. And it was effectively just a card game at that point. But it seems as though, along with the sort of evolution of it as a card game, there was a sort of underground, somewhat undocumented use of it for divination practices, sort of evolving along with it, until you get into pretty deep into the 18th century, and then there's a kind of an occultist, one of many occultist revivals. They really glom onto it and start applying Kabbalistic ideas and sort of esoteric Christian ideas to it. And the decks themselves begin to evolve to kind of adapt to that. But yeah, I mean, it's been around, recognizable tarot has been around, for 600 years or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's old.
You
Yeah.
mentioned something in there where I'm curious now. I didn't plan to ask you this, but the kind of
Yeah.
with the kind of occult revivals, right? Like kind of
Mhm.
are we living through an occult revival right now, would
Oh
you
yeah.
say? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And part of it is you can see it online. It's taking it's taking a slightly different shape than probably previous ones have, but like the there's a bunch of it has a bunch of new sort of constituent parts that previous occult revivals didn't have. Like and these range from like 4chan meme magic
Right.
like
Yeah.
stuff, which isn't really my bailiwick. Like I don't know that much about it, to be honest. Um, so from that to various varieties of like New Age slash Wicca slash paganism, but yeah, I mean, it's easier to find somebody to read your tarot now than it probably ever has been in history, and so that's definitely happening. Um, people disparage astrology or whatever, but I bet 50% of people or more give astrology some level of credence, right? Ranging from full on belief to there's something to it. I definitely think there is, and I think part of the reason for that is people have the feeling that I think there's a so the internet has done something weird, and I think something that very few people predicted, and that is that we thought that we would get all of this information at our fingertips and that we would know everything. And it turns out that instead we just built a even more confusing informational labyrinth than before the internet. Yeah, like you name a topic, and I can go and build a credible case for opposing sides of it, linking to like fairly reputable sources on both sides of it. And so I think when you get that kind of thing, it seems to me that people start looking for like the quote unquote hidden answers. And then you're in the esoteric territory for sure. You got to get into the sort of interpretive layer. And I think that's a big part of something like an occult revival. Um, a lot of people I know think that that's scary or bad. I personally don't. Um, just like anything, you can get into some bad territory with it. But I think it's I I mean, I have like a mystic. The mystic, mystical and mystic always has always kind of appealed to me, and so um, I do think that is something else too. It's like there's along with the trying to find the answers thing, there's also a seeking of genuine experience, like of something actually happening. Um, and that's also where people are going to kind of go into occult slash mystical territory as well, looking for something to actually happen, right? So yeah, I definitely think there is one. I think it's mostly a good thing too, personally, but
Yeah.
somebody will yell at me about that, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, it's just interesting how there's this like I think it goes along with what people are calling now the spiritual revival, the
Hmm.
increase in people attending church and blah blah blah.
Right.
You know, people that are familiar with it know what we're talking about. It seems like it is coming from like a desperation place, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it in terms of like, yeah, like people want a meaning. They want
Hmm.
to know that they're in tune with the universe in some way, you know, like whether
Right.
that be through, yeah, like tarot or yeah, going to church on Sunday, whatever it is, you know, you want to be in tune with the world. You feel like you're not as in tune as you were with the internet,
Yeah.
and and I have some questions about social media because you're a guy who uses social media in this way too, but like, you know, I wanted to ask because of that, because I mean, we always talk about this, you know, in terms of like its role in a writer's life and career, its place in terms of marketing, and you know, like how do you use it as a writer and all of that? Like, is it's one of the it's a question that is looming all over all of this, and like you can have the best book in the world if you're not marketing it, if you're not posting about it, if you're not making, you know, TikTok info things about it,
Right.
nobody knows it exists. So there is this
Yes.
kind of conundrum. And I mean, you know, we interview authors on this podcast all the time from all different levels, and a lot of them are hesitant. Even the big ones, like, you know, that like we've had on are just like, you know, it's not worth it because, and of course, they have kind of a marketing team through a main press or something, and they're grandfathered in.
Right.
But so there's that, but they don't have to deal with it. But like, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on, yeah, social media in this world of being a writer? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, personally, if I wasn't trying to get people to listen to my podcast and buy or read stuff that I write, I'd like to think that I wouldn't be on it at all. I mean, I made a decision in 2021 or late 2020 that I'd been writing for a long time and it occasionally, various websites. I had like a Tumblr that had some subscribers, and I had a blog spot that had some subscribers, and yada yada yada. Already been through my MFA. I'd already had a couple literary journal publications, but I kind of realized that like I didn't, I wanted to not do any of this like marketing stuff, right? I didn't want to do any of that self-promotion stuff. I really didn't. And then I just realized like, well, nobody's ever going to read anything you write if you don't. So you
Yeah.
can make your decision. That's fine. But like, I kind of realized that that was the decision that I had to accept, that was just how things are as a writer, especially not having the backing of a publisher or anything like that. If I don't get out there and scrounge up some subscribers or followers, literally nobody's ever gonna read anything. So that was kind of like the deal that I made with the devil. I don't know. But then you kind of realize, I mean, it's also it's not excuse me, it's also not all bad. You get to meet people, like genuinely make connections with people, and that's great. I think like a writer in 2025 just kind of has to decide like what are they okay, beyond just writing the thing, whatever it is that you're writing, what are you trying to do? And if you genuinely don't care about readership, then I guess, don't do it then. That's
Right.
fine. But unless you get a big somehow manage to get a big book deal, and I question whether you're going to be able to do that without social media too, frankly,
Yeah.
at this point. Uh then you're gonna have to figure out some way to engage with it. And once you do, there's various levels of you can do it to various degrees. Um, I personally, I have like timers set up. I can only go on Twitter on my laptop. I can go on Twitter for 20 minutes a day, and then a timer shuts it off. And on my phone, I sometimes change it up depending on what's going on. Like if I just released something, I'll increase my timer so I can like respond to stuff and whatever. But yeah, I have a timer on my phone for Substack and Twitter as well. I can't I can't stomach Facebook, so I don't go on there at all. Plus, it's all just like people I went to high school with. There's
Right.
like not
Yeah.
really, it's too weird. And what else? Instagram. I don't know any writers who are using Instagram well. Maybe there are some that I'm not aware of. That seems like more like in, I guess you could promote books on there by like taking a picture of a book like in a cool setting or something, but there doesn't seem to be much like engagement with like the content or the ideas or whatever. So yeah, I think it is critical. I think it's weird because not only is it critical, but it's also like the chief avenue for distraction for a writer. And you have to be very, very careful that how to say this the best. As a writer trying to get people to read stuff, when you get them to read it, you get a little bit of, I just call it juice. You get a little bit of juice from that. You have to be careful that you're not getting all of your juice from social media. Because then it will de-incentivize you from actually getting the writing done. So that's the thing where I feel like you have to be careful. Um, unless you turn your social media into its own art project, then I guess that's sort of different. But yeah, that's the one thing I'm always kind of wary of. Is it like, am I getting the juice that I want to get from people reading House of Sleep? Am I getting that from like some offhanded tweet that I shout out in 30 seconds? So then if I'm doing that too much, then I know I'm on there, that I'm too heavily invested in what happens on Twitter or Substack or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right on that. You can see it happen with certain ones. Like he's not a literary writer, but I'm a fan of the journalist Wesley Yang,
Hmm.
and he's a great Twitter follow as well. He hasn't really been writing much apart from like long kind of Twitter posts and stuff like that. And I
Yeah.
mean, they're good. He's still doing the kind of journalistic stuff, but you
Yeah.
see it almost like his whole, and then partly because his whole kind of career as an independent journalist is kind of possible because of his following on these kind of platforms and stuff. And then Substack and thing, but he hasn't even really been writing long Substacks or anything like that. He's
Really.
just been
Yeah.
doing posts, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, you can kind of see it happen to even people that are intelligent, careful, want to do a good job, want to do good writing, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, the social media posts can start overtaking that too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy how that happens. So I think the way you put it is perfect. Yeah, it is this kind of dance you have to do. And that can be pretty, I mean, that can be pretty stressful. I mean, that can be pretty
Mhm.
like, what the hell am I doing here? How much time am I spending? I think about it with this podcast often too. How much time do I want to spend on this if it's taking away from other things and
Right.
stuff? And it's a literary podcast, so it's a small listenership anyway. And then it's just kind of like, yeah, what are you doing? And it's like, well, what else would I be doing? I guess
Right.
just
Right.
might as well do it.
Yeah.
But and I mean, there are a couple going off of that. I wanted to ask you about which is becoming a social media stuff about Substack.
Hmm.
What is happening with Substack in your sense? What is happening with Substack? I get this kind of vague sense of people almost rejecting it or talking about how it's oversaturated or something. I don't know. How have you used Substack and where
Yeah.
do you see it going? Is it the future of writing? And all that. Because I mean, even just this trajectory when it first came out here, you had Roxane Gay in the pages of the New York, Washington Post calling it a hub for fascism. And then within 6 to 8 months, she had her own Substack and was,
Right. Of
and
course.
it just, of
Of
course,
course.
I mean, people, listeners to this know I always don't miss a chance to call out Roxane Gay as a professional liar. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. Where do you see Substack? Where do you see it going? How do you use it? What is happening with this kind of? Is it just because everybody's doing it now? I mean, what are you seeing? How are you? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have gotten more active on Substack. I sometimes am a little, so there's always this sort of turnover in terms of like what's like the hot thing, the place where a writer needs to be. And like I said, I had these other like I was in, I had a blog spot and then nobody goes on there anymore. And that's fine. But
Right,
like,
right.
you start cultivating like a little audience and then all the energy switches someplace else. And I feel like I worked kind of hard to build up a Twitter following. And
Right.
then at some point this year I was like, wait, I'm supposed to be on Substack actually. And then you go over there and you're like, all right, I don't have any subscribers. I'm starting from scratch again, which is frustrating. Um, but in terms of like what's happening there, there's cool stuff happening there for sure, and there's some good writers that are happening there. The algorithm is really weird. Um, I don't trust any of the statistics that they have. I don't trust any of their analytics. I think that there's this weird, people are sort of fascinated with like the rising chart, the number, the rise. I don't think that
Right.
number actually means anything at all. And I can tell you why, because I showed up on there one time and it was literally during a lull in every other data point in my analytics. So what does that mean? How am I
Right.
how am I in a rising chart when I'm literally it's like the worst week behind the scenes, it's the worst week for my Substack since I started. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I don't trust any of the analytics. I don't know what they're trying to tell you with the analytics. If it's some means of like incentivizing, de-incentivizing stuff, I'm not sure. Um, there's the algorithm is also really weird. Like, it's not very good at feeding me stuff that I want to see.
Yeah.
Um, it and and then also there's every social media platform sort of develops its own kind of lexicon and grammar and like collective perspective. And I've just realized in the last few weeks that the notes timeline is annoying on
Yeah.
Substack. Like I do not like it. And I get a higher proportion of like just rude, insipid replies to stuff than I get on Twitter. Just like stuff where it's just like people coming out of the blue to say really odd things for like based on not, and that seems to be actually I know Twitter is always thought of as this sort of cesspool, but I get actually more of it on Substack of just like random people like responding to you with super condescending remarks that have nothing to do with it's weird. So I'm trying to figure all that. I'm trying to kind of wade through that stuff a little bit and try to understand what's going on there. I think um this will probably be this maybe I'm alone here. I don't read long posts on Substack.
Right.
I just don't. Like every once in a while I will, maybe. But I just don't. I'm sure there's great stuff on there. I just can't. I sort of I don't know. So I don't know what's happening there. I think probably a writer probably needs to be on there to some degree, but I think maybe be careful, especially as a fiction writer, be careful thinking that developing a subscriber base there necessarily translates to anything um,
Yeah.
beyond, uh, uh, you know, what percentage of your subscribers are actually going to read your thing, I think is actually pretty low.
Right.
Um, so you just have to kind of recognize that that's the thing. Um,
I
yeah.
think you're right about it. I mean, in terms of that notes timeline, what you had a great tweet about it where you're talking about getting the ick from the timeline of
Hmm.
of notes, and it was I almost replied to it. I didn't think I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll talk to him about this when he comes on. I was like, well,
Yeah.
where I was just thinking, yeah, the vibe I get, it's like every kind of insufferable person in your MFA kind of workshop
Hmm.
is like on that timeline, and they're
Right.
constantly kind of that henpecking kind of thing about every little thing about, and then it's always like, even if it's not there, they bring in whatever their little pet like topic is into it.
Right.
It's just
Right.
like that on like a large social media timeline scale. At least that's what it feels like. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of those posts where people are like, I wrote 1,000 words today, blah blah blah,
Right.
and then it gets for some reason it has like 5,000 likes or something. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's an
there's
average day to most people that are
right.
in this game, man. I mean, like, what are
Yeah.
you? I mean,
Yeah.
are you
Well, there's a
14? Like,
yeah.
like,
There's part of that algorithm, and I'm trying to follow and subscribe to different kinds of things, interests that aren't specific to writing, so that maybe my algorithm will get kind of jarred a little bit and won't be so much of this. But there is like a large contingent of Substack that is like LinkedIn for writers. Like it has
yeah,
that same sort of like self-helpy, like vague, like uh thing. And I hate that stuff.
yeah,
Like yeah, you should write 1,000 words a day, but like or whatever, but like there's something distasteful about turning writing into this like yeah, something that you can slot like other self-helpy stuff into. It's just weird to me. I don't know. I don't care for it.
yeah. And
So,
I've
yeah.
seen some interesting things about how, it rewards Substack itself kind of tends to reward, at least the demand on that website is more for political commentary, cultural commentary,
Mhm.
nonfiction than it is for fiction or
Yeah.
poetry or even literary kind of criticism. Like nobody's really, again, just like everything else, it's a small little niche on there, just like it is anywhere
Yeah.
else in social media. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's true too. Like if you're a writer and you start a Substack, even if you're a big name, people are mostly interested in your commentary and not so
Mhm.
much, your latest short fiction or something that you
Right.
put up there or a little teaser you put up there for the novel that's about to
Yeah.
come out or whatever. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just
I
tends
actually
to
I had a bunch of short fiction. I actually took all my short fiction down off of Substack.
really.
Yeah, I just don't it felt like I was just pitching like it feels really noisy, and I felt like I was just adding to the noise. Just like
Yeah.
another thing that people aren't going to read.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's primarily, I mean, I post occasional notes or whatever, but it's mostly I'm writing some pieces on the tarot are still up there, but it's primarily just podcast stuff for me. Um, and according to the analytics, which again, I don't actually trust, I get a fair amount of like probably the majority of my podcast downloads on Substack somehow.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's how I've been kind of using it, where I kind of use it as like a website, like an author website where I don't have to pay a domain fee, like it's kind of like if you like
Mhm.
me, here's my podcast, here's some,
Mhm.
and I've put up some nonfiction stuff that I didn't get published elsewhere, but most of what I
Mhm.
put up there so far is stuff that was published in other journals over the years and kind of like this is my stuff, here's the link, here's links, you can even support me monthly or yearly if you want,
Yeah.
kind of like here's a website of like what I'm doing and you can come here and have everything. I
Yeah.
don't know if
Well,
that's the best way to do it, but
yeah,
yeah,
the tools to paywall stuff and all are really good though.
yeah.
Like that's helpful to
And I've
have.
noticed Patreon is stealing from them now in terms
Yeah.
of like Patreon is revamping all their stuff to be more like Substack.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just got an email where they're like, "Oh, do a newsletter thing." And it's not
Yeah.
even as close to what, Substacks. It makes it very easy to do a newsletter, whereas Patreon makes it a little harder. They don't quite,
Yeah.
maybe they're losing market share to something like Substack. I don't know,
I think
but
they
yeah.
probably are. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that they are.
Especially during
Yeah.
the kind of free speech scare when like Substack came out and we're like, our thing is, we're not going to kick you off our platform for any reason as long
Yeah.
as it's like speech, and
Yeah.
they've
And then
stayed
they
true to
became
that.
a hub for fascism.
Right. Well,
So,
because they said that. That's what
right.
she wrote in her article, Roxanne
That's
Gay.
wild.
So listeners can go look it up. Yeah. But we'll link those as well, listener. You're gonna see what Brad was just and this goes off of that too. And this is just a broad question, Brad, that I wanted your thoughts on.
Mm.
Why is no one reading books? Why are book sales down? Why is this thing that everybody has this kind of built-in reverence for? There's like a little built-in reverence for high literary poetry. We're just kind of, I don't know if we just feel like we should be reverent towards it or something, but like, yeah, I don't know. Your thoughts on that? I
Yeah.
know that's a big one. So however you want to answer
Yeah.
it, please.
I think there's a lot of competing sort of forces. I mean, there is, well, like a subset of this question is the why aren't men reading question,
Right.
right? Which
Yeah.
is been sort of done to death, and uh there are interesting there are interesting points to be made between like they're not marketing, no, like very little new fiction is being marketed to men. It's either sort of so the kind of the options for men are sort of like genre slop or classics basically. And there's some truth to that. But even still, there is. I mean, I've met any number of men who don't read, who actually read, but just don't read fiction. They just think
Right.
they think there's sort of nothing there for them. It's pure escapism or whatever. I mean, I think the one thing is there is a general societal tendency, and I'm not. I'm not innocent of this, and I don't want this to sound like this curmudgeonly, like
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.
these days thing. But there is this, I mean, we're tending towards there's a sort of materialist tendency, trend in everything, sort of. And there's an algorithmic, and that goes hand in hand with this sort of algorithmic, wow, what would the word be? Algorithmicization of sort of everything. And that those two things come along with so I'm probably not the first person to say this, but this is how I think of it. So the term pornography, this core conceit to it that I think actually applies to a bunch of stuff is that you get the thing without having to put anything into it, right? So pornography is you get sex without like having to be a halfway decent person who can attract somebody to have sex with you, right? You don't have to put anything up to get it. And we've taken that principle and applied it to everything, right? And a lot of times you're kind of blind to it, right? It's like, growing up growing up sort of before streaming music became commodified, you kind of had to dig to find some music a little bit. You had to go to a store, you had to like know a guy, you had to get on Napster and like hope that you got a link to the right thing. It took some effort, and then now it takes no effort at all. And the similar thing for everything, for movies is the same thing, right? Like I love the fact that suddenly YouTube is putting all these great movies up for free, but that's turning the cinematic experience into like sort of porno. Like I don't have to do any, I don't have to make any effort to track down. The algorithm will just give me the next thing to watch. So I think this is the problem. One of the problems with readership is it's very difficult to pornography literature. Like you have to read the book.
Right.
Podcasts like mine, like Method Madness, kind of pornography a little bit because you can listen to that and feel like you get some understanding of the book or whatever. But even still, like you can't you still have to read the book to actually read the book.
Right.
And so I think there's a thing with that. I think there's so many forces in this algorithmic pornographication direction, and novels and poetry and not even necessarily challenging texts, but stuff that require to read a good sized novel is going to take 6, 8, 10, 12 hours to read. They stand askance that entire trend, and so it's sort of every year fits less and less into the cultural milieu of things. That's kind of what I think the overall reason is for. And you could say that like in an easier way, there's too many distractions or whatever, but it's not quite just the distractions. It's the sort of the nature of the distractions. They don't ask anything of you. You don't have to put anything up to engage in them. Whereas to read a good novel, you actually have to put something up. Fundamentally, it's just your time, but it's actual time.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
requirements of imagination as well, right? Like the way that
Hmm.
like you
Hmm.
don't have to imagine what's like when you're watching a movie, it's all there for you. But
It's
like when
all
you're
there.
reading the novel, you're imagining the voices, the accents, you're imagining the scenes and stuff, and it requires more work, more mental capacity even. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
There's just interesting how I mean, it's the question that nobody really has an answer to, where we're kind of like, what is going on? Why are the sales so low? Why does the industry feel like it's kind of falling apart, like in this weird way? I don't
Yeah.
know, because you even see like some of the biggest literary figures right now, and the example that comes right to my head is, Tessa Moshfegh or somebody. She's writing on Substack,
Yep.
like I mean, I'm sure she's gotten some nice book deals, and they made a movie out of her one book, so she probably got a nice check for that. But I'm sure she's still, scraping together a living as a writer in that,
Right.
it's just. So even somebody at that level is still struggling with the realities of it. Of course, not as much as, some of us out there, but yeah,
Right.
I don't know. It
Right.
just. And then there was that viral article that I actually covered on the show with the, no one reads books, which was
Right.
about the numbers that came out of the antitrust case between Penguin and Random House, or Penguin Random House and Simon and Schuster, uh,
Yeah.
trying to merge,
Yeah.
that got shut down, and it just is the sales and stuff. Like, I don't know. Yeah, there's a bunch of different things, and it's just crazy.
I
But
remember reading that article and then
yeah,
thinking, House of Sleep didn't do too bad, actually.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, if you're
Yeah.
selling 200 copies or something, like you're
Right.
on par with if you got a major
Right.
book deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
For a
Wild.
first time author, at least. Yeah. We're not talking about the big grandfathered in ones. That's strange too. And there's always been like, tiers to this, right? Like, so Stephen King being a top tier kind of guy made, I think his net worth's like 450 million or something. This guy is
Right.
rich as hell off of writing his books.
Yeah.
And then there's tiers of kind of like the elite kind of writers for the New Yorker, and then there's kind of like, the average kind of middle of the road stuff. There's always been tiers, but for some reason now there's like this grandfathered in tier. Whereas,
Hmm.
like, I know you always talk about McCarthy and stuff on your stuff, you're a big fan, and it's just kind of this like McCarthy is one that people always talk about as if like they're like, oh, McCarthy, McCarthy, and I'm like, yeah, but like there is no effort to find the next McCarthy. McCarthy's like, oh, we already did that, so now we're like
Right.
kind of grandfather him in. Even the next Stephen King, I don't even think there's a lot of effort to find like the next Stephen King or somebody who's going to
No.
make his agent, his publisher, his manager, everybody a lot of money if
Yeah.
cranking out these very compelling page turners. And
Yeah.
nobody, it seems like, I don't know if and Brandon Sanderson or somebody. I mean, I don't know. You see these figures, the Colleen Hoovers, the people that have made it through this kind of internet posting, self-publishing, and then doing TikToks and this kind of, I don't know. I mean, I mean, again, I don't think we're gonna get an answer. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating how this works. I mean, I don't know what's
I,
going on. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the publishing industry, as far as I can tell, doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't seem to have, like, it seems to have lost the pulse entirely of and I don't know, I don't know I don't know what's going on in those offices exactly well enough to like understand how that loss happened.
right,
I think it's really easy and probably not altogether untrue to couch it in the sort of culture war
right,
discourse. I do know that, when you're interfacing with agents uh, who are the gatekeepers of that industry, it's not clear to me that they know what they're doing, or that they're making any effort. Like, you don't see agents trawling Substack looking for like
right.
diamonds in the rough. That doesn't happen. They don't know. They don't go looking for it. They just, they have an enormous slush pile. Um, I- I'm not sure that they even really read beyond the first few pages of anything in the slush pile.
And they don't even read it.
Um,
The interns, the
right,
interns'
the interns
assistants are
read
reading
it.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, and you'll
if they're
get
reading it. Yeah,
right, right. And you'll get sort of, I mean, I always laugh, and this may have just been sort of form letter or whatever, but when I was trying to get House of Sleep published, I had a couple people ask for the full manuscript, and nothing ever came of it. But one agent responded to me that they thought the book was great, but that it needed an edit. And I was like, yeah, that's what a public, like, what do you of course it needs an edit. Like, wait, like, you know what I mean? What they're expecting is the fully polished. They also want you to already basically have a career, right?
Right. And a
Right.
following
It's like,
already. And
right.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, if you have 10,000 plus followers on some platform and you already paid an editor to edit your book and this and that and blah, 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 and then you also fit the right sort of demographic criteria, then, then you probably get put into a different tranche of evaluation for whether you're going to get representation or not. When I think there was more of an effort, for whatever reason, there was more of an effort to like, there's some, looking at the slush pile and thinking there's some gold in there. We just have to find it. And now the gold is, oh, that person has 20,000 Twitter followers. And, it
Right.
isn't the gold. It isn't the gold is an incredible book that people need to see. It's something else that's being measured. And
And
I
pe
think, yeah,
no, I mean, people deny this, but I mean, I've heard from, the horse's mouth, whereas I haven't been on that committee, but I had friends on the committee, hiring committees.
mm,
People are getting jobs based on having a certain number of followers, especially in when you get
yes,
to the elite fields like higher ed, New
yep,
Yorker, these nice perches to be a writer from.
right, right,
There were, a friend who was on, the hiring committee for, I'm not even going to say the name. He was basically an online poet, but not even because, he was getting published at Grey Wolf and stuff like that. And it was not like, so, I mean, I don't think it's good, but it wasn't like, some self-published thing. But he was still like, so he had like 40,000 followers or something. Well, that tipped the scales for them to hire him as
yep,
opposed to everybody else, trying to
yep,
get hired at that position. And it wasn't even like a super elite, it was like a low res
right,
MFA position or something.
right,
But, through the grapevine, I've heard that, yeah, that was the deciding factor, and people were
yeah,
openly saying so in the thing. Again, it's not something you could write an article about to prove or something,
right.
but
Which,
it's
and the one hand, it's like if you're using the subscriber count as a proxy for something valuable that you're looking for, that's one thing. But like the subscriber count, if you're thinking about what it measures, it's not directly related to like the quality of a person's work or their potential for generating new work in the future. It's sort of measuring how well they surfed the algorithm.
right,
And yeah, there's something good about that, I suppose, from a publisher standpoint or whatever. But it does seem like the publishing industry has sort of out attempted to sort of externalize all the stuff that they used to be responsible for. And so at that point, it's almost like if you have the sort of cachet to get that big book deal, you don't need it,
right.
and that's what's odd. Yeah.
And it's also interesting that like that's become a metric because, like you said, the way the algorithms have changed, the follower count doesn't necessarily mean engagement now. It's
No,
this
it doesn't.
weird kind of like you see people with like 1 million followers, they have like 100 likes or something on a post.
Right.
It's like, huh, you would think that would at least go to like 100,000 different people or something if they have a
Right.
couple
Right.
million people following
Yeah.
them, but it
Yeah.
doesn't because I guess it's just not getting enough engagement, so the algorithm doesn't boost it or something, even if you have a
Right.
high follower count. And I wonder that doesn't even necessarily translate to sales, like you were saying.
No.
Delicious Tacos, who I've been trying to get on the podcast. Tacos, if you're listening, come on the pod. He had a tweet a few years ago. I remember he's saying something like, for every 2,000 impressions you get on Twitter, he's like, it equals maybe one book sale or something. Like it
Yeah.
is not like, oh, I got 1,000 impressions, so I'm going to sell 100 books. No, it's like you get a
No.
couple thousand impressions, you sell one. Like,
Yes. That sounds more like it to me.
so these algorithms aren't even really pushing sales. And they work for certain products. So if you're pushing like a stupid product or something and you do a TikTok and have the kind of marketplace stuff that they let you do on Instagram and TikTok where you can link the product directly in the video and they
Right.
just click and there it is. That works for things like Shopify if you're selling, handmade sweatshirts, whatever the fuck it is,
Right.
things you knitted or something. That works. It doesn't seem to work for books. Maybe it does for some of these big people on TikTok, some of the big book talk stuff, Colleen Hoover level, or even some of the smaller level stuff, a couple 100,000
Yeah.
on TikTok. I will say something about the TikTok algorithm in terms of like it's more willing to just throw your shit out there. Like I think
Is
some
it?
places
Yeah.
like Twitter and stuff, they're trying to shift the algorithm a little to make it more like TikTok because you could be a nobody with zero followers, post a video, and if it starts going places, it will easily get hundreds of thousands of,
Yeah.
people eyes on it because the algorithm's just so good at getting people to engage with, what's on the screen. So you see all these kind of tech companies trying to change it to chase TikTok now because they had a better algorithm than Facebook and Twitter and Insta, all these other companies that are fighting for your attention. It's just
Right.
interesting how that's playing out. I don't know, and it doesn't seem to translate. I've even seen, I saw that interview with, it was a couple months ago, Maya Hawke, Ethan Hawke's daughter. She said a passing comment in an interview where she said something about how she's had casting directors like just grill her on like social media and engagement. How many followers do you have? And there's like, so they're casting people in shows now, even based on this. And I noticed it in
Right.
reality TV first. I like 90 Day Fiance. My wife and I watch it every week and stuff. And a couple years ago, there was a huge shift where they started casting these kind of like, moderate influencers, like
Influencer. Yeah.
100,000, 200,000 followers around that mark. They would cast them in there to have this kind of built-in audience, but I wonder if it even brought in a bigger audience. Like it was already the biggest reality show on TV. How much more is this 100,000 follower account going to boost those numbers for watching
Right.
every week? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it almost doesn't even make sense. And maybe it's like, and you and I have talked about this before, maybe it's changing so fast too that even these huge industries are not keeping up with the changes that are happening every year. They're still thinking it's 2015, where if you have a
Right.
couple 100,000 followers, you're getting several 100,000 impressions every time you post something. That's just not the case anymore. Everything's
Right.
kind of changed. I don't know. I mean, we're all kind of in that space, even at the highest levels, which is we like to think that those were like, oh, they had something figured out, and maybe they did, in the
Yeah.
previous century, but it's just not anymore. I don't know it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's a
I
shame, yeah,
mean,
really.
you also have to keep in mind you can just buy followers, like
Yeah,
literally pay
it's
for
always a
them.
scandal
So
with the Real Housewives casts.
sure.
That's always
Right.
a thing that you
Right.
see on like page 6 or something. Oh, she bought followers, or they use it as an insult or something like.
Mhm. Mhm.
And probably yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not that expensive either. Yeah,
Right, 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 right. Yeah, exactly. It's not that expensive. And yeah, and then that affects your literal engagement because I want to have actual people engaged. Like it
right,
doesn't do me any good to have 10,000 followers and 7,000 of them are paid for because that doesn't translate to anything for me, It doesn't translate to podcast downloads and people eventually the sort of
right.
funnel of people eventually paying to get stuff behind the paywall doesn't translate to people buying books. So none of that's the number of followers does help. It's good. When somebody else subscribes and please do subscribe out there, but like
Right.
it's good, but it's good when it's an actual person who
Right.
might actually engage with whatever I'm doing. So,
I've seen even like weird, like deep YouTube kind of instructional videos on how to use bot farms in China and Asia and stuff too.
mhm.
Not necessarily, I mean, obviously it'll grow your follower count and all of that, but it's like to boost your account to get to the next stage because they want to see a certain level of engagement before they start boosting your videos into the
Yep.
algorithm or whatever. So you
Yep.
could pay to get a little head start or something where you have this kind
Hmm.
of bot swarm and get 10,000 views. So then the next one you put up there, the algorithm's like, okay, well, this got 10,000. But apparently YouTube's getting wise to that too. So, like these companies are getting better at kind of trying to avoid that. They want active engagement because that's real
Yeah.
dollars, real cents that they're making
Right.
when you're actively
Yeah,
engaging.
because on YouTube, if you have over 1,000 subscribers, then you can become pay,
Right.
you can basically have paid ads, and then they do boost that. My previous show, Art of Darkness, did get over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube organically, and then and then you do start getting boosted, and it kind of, but I do think that they have a way of looking at your subscribers versus actual engagement and determining how legitimate that subscriber number actually is. So.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't
weird. I
work
mean,
for long. Yeah.
right, right, right. Yeah, we definitely live in this. That's what's funny. It's like we're going to base everything on the algorithm, and then the algorithm's like 50% fake. And so it's like, what is the entire, and then you get to the questions like, okay, then what is the culture based on? We based on the algorithm, and then the algorithm's mostly fake, and then nobody actually even knows how the algorithm. It becomes this weird loop where like, what is actually even sort of really happening, right? It's difficult to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few questions I want to ask that are kind of more personal questions, and then before we get
Sure.
to like the writing stuff, like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
craft stuff that we like to do here. I wanted to ask you one, let's start with the weightlifting, bodybuilding stuff. How did you get
Sure.
started on that? How did that become a part of your life? What do you
Yeah.
get out of it, all of that good stuff as a hobby and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it started playing football in high school, and we had a hardcore football teacher, like old school, or not football teacher, football coach, hardcore old school football coach who wanted everybody to be as big as they possibly could, and we were a pretty good team. And so that kind of is kind of where it started, and then I kind of stuck with it to varying degrees, but probably the reason that I consistently do it is. It's like the most powerful antidepressant known to man.
Yeah.
There's like nothing quite like it. And also like I'm in a really great spot in life right now, but I haven't always been. And it does seem like in those darker times, one of the things that has kept my head together is being in the gym on a pretty regular basis. And so, uh, yeah, I mean that's the fundamental. What is that meme that's like a caveman and he's like sad, I'm sad, lift the heavy rock, now I'm not so sad or something like that. It's literally true. I mean, it does make you legitimately feel better. But I also, beyond that, and then of course there's like aesthetic stuff that's nice about it. It's nice to be, especially when you're a single dude, but also when you're married to keep yourself attractive for your significant other. But so there's that. That's always good to, feel comfortable in your own body. It helps with that. But there's also something about, I mean, to get Joe Rogan-y for a second, there is something valuable about like doing something difficult every day. Like it actually, I do think, and there's other ways you could do this. I'm sure you could do this cold plunges or whatever, but like
Yeah.
it does make you mentally tougher. Because every day you're like trying to squeeze out that one more thing, right? And I think that part of the discipline has been like helpful for me overall. It gives you this, yeah, doing something that's actually hard, that's sort of demanding on your central nervous system on a regular basis um makes you mentally more durable, and I think also makes you like less likely to sort of be pushed around. And I would sort of mean that physically, actually, in the real world, but also sort of like in your
Yeah.
interpersonal life. I mean, there's like an element of just like, I'm sturdy. I
Yeah.
I know you know a little bit, you kind of know a better sense of who you are. Um
People
and
even like
then
hassle you less on the street,
they do.
like when you
It's
have a
true.
little bit of bulk to you, a little bit of
Hmm.
definition to your muscles.
Right.
People
It's
tend,
true.
homeless people tend to not hassle you as much, as like the skinny
It's
little person or the woman with the child, they tend to
mhm.
go to the weaker people when it's like, yeah,
Yeah. It's absolutely true. It's happening on kind of a subconscious level for the most part, but it's
right,
it's
right.
it's totally true. And then there's another thing that it better than anything else teaches you one of the important truths about being a human being is it trains you to understand incremental improvement
Yeah,
because you don't get results fast. You don't get results from one day to the next. So it does teach you like the actual sort of, if I'm just consistent over time doing stuff that has worked for other people, then eventually, if you have some faith in the process, eventually you will get results. And that's translatable to like everything,
yeah.
really. But it's
I say
translatable to like
novel
building.
writing. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And everything else, like, building a business, building a family, trying to repair a relationship, whatever. Learning that sort of like just keep at it and keep going, even when you can't necessarily see the results from one day to the next. And at some point you look behind you and you're like, oh man, I came a long way.
yeah,
Um, that's probably the biggest thing it sort of taught me about life was it taught me how to get better at something. And that it's not easy. It's not easy to get
yeah,
better at anything at all. Like name something to get better at that is not easy. So that's probably been the biggest thing for me. But
yeah.
in terms of like life lessons, but there's also I think why I do it regularly is I mean I tell my wife like uh because I have moods, I'm a writer, I'm pretty neurotic and but if writing is going well and I'm getting workouts in, I'm pretty good. Like
Yeah.
even if other stuff is out of whack, I'm
Yeah.
pretty good as long as those two things are happening. I'm pretty like I can kind of handle whatever chaos life throws at me. But if I that falls out of sorts, writing hasn't been going well, and I haven't been able to work out in a week or two, I start getting all
Yeah.
weird and whiny and sensitive and impatient and yeah, so
Depressed even. Yeah. It's
depressed. Yep.
the way you describe it is I like to describe it to people too. It's almost meditative in a way.
Hmm.
And get it, Brad and I are not somebody who's competing, in amateur
Right.
competitions or something, but it is just kind of that hour and a half a day or something, whatever it is, 2 hours a day where you have your headphones in, you're not really speaking to anybody else, and then you're having the physical sensation. And when you're at a certain point, you kind of know how it all feels to how it's supposed to feel when you're doing the form
Right.
right now, and you feel that actual micro tear happening, right? And I mean,
Hmm.
there's been studies on this too. That releases endorphins into your head when your body's stressed, and then you're doing that, kind of almost like a planned stress like thing
Hmm.
on the tissue and all that. I get that, that's how it works at the science level. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious how that happened. What is your what would you say is your, I'm gonna say stack, but you say, yeah, so supplements and then your routine. Do you do the
Oh
bodybuilding
yeah,
thing and
sure.
separate muscle groups? How do you like to do that?
Yeah, supplements that just creatine and protein. And I switch up my routine every once in a while. So most of the summer I was doing like a pretty much straightforward bodybuilding routine, which, is like sort of like a basically a push day, a pull day, a leg day, and then I had a couple wild cards that I would throw in there, and I was doing it like I don't know, 3 days on, 1 day off, and yeah, and that was very like that was hypertrophy. And I put on a couple pounds, and that was sort of my goal. Putting on muscle has got, I'm in my 40s now, and putting on
Right,
muscle is and this isn't to brag, but I kind of did put on a lot of muscle over the last 10, 15 years. And
right.
so as I'm older and I already kind of did it, it's harder and harder to add for sure.
Yeah,
Um, and but then now I'm sort of and this is more for the mental thing. I tend to I do some sets of one heavy compound movement, and then I do these sort of high intensity interval routines where I basically pick like 4 or 5 exercises and I just without stopping for 25 minutes I go from one to the next and try to do a kind of overall body thing and those are tailored to be like 70 every set's like 75% towards failure and I just keep going and going and going and then by like the last set it's to failure essentially but that's also some like get my cardio in because I don't run. I hate running.
right. Yeah,
So it's a
yeah.
little bit of a mixed bag, but it's a little bit of sort of like CrossFit-y kind of stuff, a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of it. And it seems to work out pretty well for me. Yeah.
I'm curious
What
because
do you do?
I do the kind of standard kind of bodybuilding,
Mhm.
5 days a week, usually, sometimes six. If I do six
Mhm.
day, I'll usually just do something like soft, like cardio and abs or something.
Yeah,
If I do that 6 day, and then I always have to have at least one day of rest. Yeah, because
right.
otherwise, yeah. So I'll do the muscle groups, kind of just basic, nothing fancy, even chest, back,
Mhm.
shoulders, legs, this kind of like things for each day. And then like yeah, usually the protein. And I was going to ask you if you're in your 40s, are you at the fish oil daily level yet?
I do take
Yeah,
fish oil. Yeah,
yeah. I
for
was going to
sure. For
say,
sure.
right when I hit like 33, I noticed that I would just a lot of soreness, and I realized like I got to start doing fish oil daily because otherwise those joints are just going to be sore as hell. If you're working
Yeah.
out every day, I mean, even if you're not,
Yeah.
you're probably going to have some soreness around that time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I was just curious. It's something that
Yeah.
I don't know, and there's all these weird associations with it. And since I had a kid, I'm carrying a lot of extra weight, like 30, 40 pounds extra weight, but than I would normally do. But
Mhm.
stresses, whatever. Do you do anything diet wise or anything crazy? Or are you like are you a Joe Rogan type meat diet?
No.
what do you like to do to keep
Um,
yourself, yeah, hitting those goals and
when I've got it locked in, it's I just try to do like almost how would I put it? I basically just try to do meat, fruit, vegetables, try to not do grains, try to keep like simple carbohydrates to a minimum. That's pretty much it.
You
Yeah.
like a protein goal or anything? Like you trying to hit
Yeah,
180
yeah. I try to
grams? Yeah.
yeah, I try to do like 70 point 0.75 grams per pound of body weight,
Right,
which would it
exactly.
ends up being at least 150. I try to hit at least 150 grams of protein every day.
The Jeff
Yeah.
Nippard science-backed
Yeah,
way to
yeah.
do it. Yeah.
And try to get that from like diverse sources. So not just it's not just all whey protein, but
Right.
meat protein and some nut protein, eggs, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, all my levels are pretty good, as though I have like again in my 40s, you do see my testosterone's still in a good range, but like it's definitely like slowly
Right.
decreasing. Yeah. So at some point we'll see if I got to do something to fix that. But so far so good.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's something too. I mean, you see this all the time. I ask just because like it's weird. One there's almost like especially in the literary and art world, there's like a sect that is like into this stuff. And then there's like, but the majority is not. And actually, there's like
Mm.
a sect that's actually actively hostile to the sect that
Yes.
likes to do this kind of thing
Yes.
or gets, like you
Yeah.
said, even for meditative reasons and kind of like the body stuff is just like, gravy on top of like,
Yeah.
your body
Yeah.
happens to look better too. So, like
Yeah.
you get multiple benefits out of it. But I don't know. It's just this crazy thing that's happening where there's like, everybody says, "Oh, fitness is the answer," and then there's people that just say, "Oh no, like if you're into fitness, you could never be an artist or something," or I don't know. It's
That's
weird
ridiculous.
rules that like go around,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
it
I think you
gets
need to
go
have a
crazy.
I think you need to have a physical component to your life too. Like
Yeah.
sort of philosophically and psychologically, I think you need to have some physical component to your life. And that doesn't mean you have to be like good or competitive or anything, but just something that you do that engages your body somehow. Yeah.
And I
I
and I
mean,
live in Vegas, dude. So sometimes when I'm going to the gym here, like this is the bodybuilding capital of the world. Like
yeah.
there are roided out freaks. I'm talking like at like a
Sure.
Planet Fitness. These guys are
Yeah.
fucking huge, and they're like lifting next to you. You're like, oh my God, I gotta move. Like, this guy is like, yeah, like, it's
Yeah.
almost like
Yeah.
the guy like literally can't like hug somebody
Right.
or something. Like so huge. I'm like, whoa, this guy is massive. You're doing a lot of steroids. Uh, but yeah, that's crazy
Yeah.
too. But I wanted to get to this kind of another personal question. There's this thing where
Yeah.
red pilling. I wanted to ask about red pilling and kind
Mm.
of everything that entails. And I think of myself in terms of my journey from where I was, maybe even 5 years ago to
Hmm.
now, or like all of that. I would just want to ask you, would you consider yourself red pilled? Is that a label where you're kind of being forced into it because you don't quite, go with the orthodoxy of the mainstream literary stuff? I don't know. How do you feel
Yeah.
about that? How would you describe it? Would you say you were ever like kind of red pilled in a certain way? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting question. I mean, and in I think probably anybody who's ever thought about it's going to have a slightly different definition. I will say that every once in a while, um, uh, I don't look at this as much as I used to, but every once in a while, with somebody go back to Twitter, if somebody follows me on Twitter, I'll look and see who else they follow, and just out of curiosity, especially if like they didn't like or retweet something. I'm like, why did
Right.
this person just follow me out of nowhere? Are they a bot? Like, what's going on here? And I can't tell you how many times I look and it's like me and then somebody and then it's like BAP. And I'm like, how did they get from BAP to me? Like, how did that, like, how am I on a list somewhere next to
Right.
BAP? Like, how does that, because to me, it doesn't make any sense. And I don't have any particular issue with BAP, but it's really not my thing. I don't get it,
Right. Same.
honestly.
Yeah.
Um,
The accent
and
and I couldn't stand it. Yeah. It's an
and I
eye
never went
roll.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I never went deep enough into it to even have like an argument against it. I just don't it's not my thing. I don't really get it. I mean I think I probably partially got in that because I'm like a straight white dude.
Right.
So that gets you sort of automatically shunts you into one direction in terms of like your engagement and you know uh you know but in terms of like red pill like uh, you know hmm, I definitely am and have sort of said some stuff that's kind of pushing back on all the woke stuff. I
Right.
will, I can definitely say that that's sort of in my bailiwick. I think, I think America, a portion of America went a little bit crazy. Um, on that kind of stuff, and got really into some weird spaces where the logic of what they were doing, even as well-intentioned as it be at its core, got very, very strange, and then it got very counterproductive, and then it got actually destructive to like American culture, in my
Right.
opinion. And then you were expected to believe a bunch of bullshit, to sort of stay on the right team. And so, like, it's weird, like, you know, like if you were to give me like a blind political quiz, like one of those political compass quizzes, I'd probably end up on the left mostly. Like not far, far left by any means, but probably like a little bit on the left, I would say, left of center. But in terms of like the sort of culture war stuff, um, I do sometimes feel like if you ever see that political cartoon where it's like there's a guy sort of in the middle, and then he gets shoved by the people on the left, and then he gets
Yeah.
caught by the people on the right, and then the people on the left are like, "Why are you with them?"
Right.
I do sort of feel like that guy sometimes, where it's just like the sort of the left side of things is so alienating if you're not on board with everything, that you kind of end up sort of by default somewhere on the right side of the spectrum. So, but I'm a pretty odd duck for that side. Like, I'm not a Christian.
Right.
Um, really, like I have sympathies for Christianity and I
Right.
have a lot of Christian friends, but I wouldn't call myself that.
Right.
Um, I've never voted for a Republican ever. Um, I'm not saying I wouldn't, it just hasn't ever happened.
Right.
Uh, I mean, I've read tarot cards and like allegedly do psychedelics sometimes. Like I'm just a very weird duck to be on that side of things. I think to the extent that I'm like to the extent that I'm red pilled, it's that I think it's cool to be a man,
Right.
and um if I feel like I'm being lied to by an institution, then that institution is my enemy. So I would say to that extent, I'm, I guess, red pilled.
Yeah.
But I find like the culture war, the political culture war stuff, both sides of it, personally pretty alienating. So,
Yeah. Well, I think the way you put it is good too, because there are several different ways that people mean that, where they mean the political side of things, who you voted for, then they also mean
mhm,
the cultural stuff, but then there's also like an overlap between those two, where the political and the cultural are tied in a certain way. Um,
yeah,
Yeah, it's just interesting how that happens. I think of people like, the writer Lionel Shriver or something, where she would
mhm,
is called that now, or she would even say she's red pilled now. But she always would write about how 10 years ago, she's like, I really haven't changed much of what I would say, 10 years ago. But all of a sudden, 10 years later, now I'm on this right wing side. It's like, okay.
right,
And that's what's interesting too. That's why I wanted to ask you about it, because I'd say I'm pretty much the same, where I call myself, yeah, an atheist center left, but that makes me center right now. Like it
right,
just kind of
right,
everything has shifted to this point where it's kind of like, okay, I have to accept that that means that I'm now center
yeah,
right. If you were center left 5, 10 years ago, well, that means that you're now center right, because it has been shifted so much. The Overton window has shifted so much, where yeah, I don't know, and that kind of just weird thing. And then you said these kind of signifiers, these markers culturally. Oh, you lift weights, well, you're probably like some, what do they
right,
call it, right wing bodybuilder or something. It's like,
right,
oh,
right,
you're into poetry or something. Oh, well, you're probably like some communist, gay communism or whatever they're called,
right,
like something like that.
right.
Like it's these weird cultural signifiers that people put a lot of stock in. They put a lot of stock in
Mm,
these, and they really care about how you line up with them. And I don't know, and
yeah,
then there's kind of litmus tests, even culturally, where you see these things where like something will happen. I don't know, like the Israel Gaza thing will happen, and then all of a sudden there's like this split between whatever it was, this kind of cultural niche you were hanging out in or something. And it is kind of crazy, but I don't know. I was just curious about it because it is one of those things that's happening. I think it's happening
mm,
to men in particular, and this kind of, like you said, not even if you're somebody who is not, who likes being a man and likes yourself, as a straight
mhm,
white
mhm,
man, that puts you in a certain category as well. You'll
right,
automatically be put in this kind of red pilled, BAP enthusiast. Yes. And people that don't know that, I'm thinking of, yeah, the boomers that listen to this, BAP is, a shorthand for
yeah. Where do
this
you
guy
start?
that goes by Bronze Age Pervert, and he wrote self-published some books, got a very large following online, and actually has some very interesting things to say. but yeah, I never got very into it. It's always there was just something off-putting about, I don't know if it was the
Same.
accent and like the act and all of that. I just did not didn't click with me. And a lot of that
Right.
stuff doesn't click with me. So
Right.
I'm just
Same.
always kind of like if you yeah, if you're somebody like us that's like, oh, the literary canon is good actually, and it's not racist, like there's
Right.
actually like that puts you at odds with it, and you're just dismissed as this kind of. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just fascinated how people deal with it, how they see themselves in that culturally, and yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's. I mean, it's an endless question too, but yeah, and I've just also tried to like document some of it, loosely on the podcast. Like, would you, you know, because yeah, myself in like 2012, looking at myself now or something, like they would not even understand what happened, probably, like what happened in terms of the culture, how I ended up in this space where
Right.
I'm, yeah, automatically considered something that's, dangerous or illogical or yeah, harboring some kind of deep-seated like resentment. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of this weird space that we're living in with this.
Mm,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, it's tricky to navigate at times. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the reasons that if you follow me on Twitter or listen to the podcast, I don't really talk about political stuff generally. And th there are a couple of reasons for that. Is one is it's like, I, with the podcast and whatnot, trying to create a space where, because those kinds of conversations have sort of infiltrated everything.
Oh
So
yeah.
like maybe make a space where you don't have to think like you can I don't want to hear anything about politics, right? I want to hear a conversation about this book. And maybe it veers into a little bit of political stuff here and there. And then the other reason is um not only do I not know that much, I'm not interested enough to find out more. And so I sort of don't see myself as in a position to make public political arguments. Like I'm not going to
Right.
get into an argument. Yeah, I don't know. I know that I don't know enough. And so there's really no, what do they call it? There's really no alpha in it for me to talk about that stuff too much, especially on like the object level, the specific like what events of the day level. I'm not paying close enough attention. I don't know enough of the context, or at least I don't feel like I do. And I'm not interested in spending the time it would take to have a really informed position on, topic X. So
Yeah.
I tend to just sort of avoid it as much as I can. Which
Yeah.
maybe is, some people might say that's a cop out, and maybe it is, but that's not how I see it, I guess.
It's interesting how that works too. When you go into a subset of a culture, uh, you just even if you fight against it, you start to slowly kind of meld into it in this way too.
Hmm.
I don't know how, or I mean, obviously just human when you're kind of getting into so I think of something like work culture. The example I always use is I had this job at like a marketing thing, and it was one of those kind of like startup things where everybody was wearing like sweatpants and basketball shorts to work and stuff. I'm not that type of person. I went to private school and had to wear a tie to high school every
Right.
day. That's just not me. And it was it's like, so then, but then like after a few weeks, like I just started wearing basketball shorts, whatever, like to work and
Hmm.
stuff. I just kind of was like, what am I even bothering to fight against? And you kind of get absorbed into this and everything else that comes with it. I don't know. Maybe it's just how our
Yeah.
brains work in this weird
I think it
way.
is. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a big part of it. Yeah, you just sort of adapt to your surroundings. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
part of it too. And then if we add the online algorithmic adaptations in there now, it's kind of this, you see people even like, yeah, I don't know, you're just put in a category if you say something like, yeah, the canon is good actually, or anything like that.
Yeah.
You're just put into this kind of category. Uh,
Yeah.
I wanted to briefly ask you about self-publishing here. And I wanted to ask
Sure.
just, your experience in self-publishing and why you chose to go that route, and how it went for you in that regard.
Yes. Yeah, so I self-published House of Sleep in 2021. The reason I decided to self-publish is because I got rejected by I think it was 70 agents and small publishers. So, yeah, so it was like, well, I guess the books, again, I have a very like, screw it, I'll do it myself kind of attitude generally. So I just thought, well, I do want this book to come out in one form or another, and maybe I'll just use this as like a launching pad to get the next one out, in a reputable publisher of some kind. Um, so yeah, choice, I don't really feel like that much of a choice, I guess. It was either that or it wouldn't come out. So I guess that was a choice. Um, But I do kind of like it in that you do have a lot of control over the process. You can do, you can hire stuff, aspects of it out. I did have an editor help me out, but in terms of formatting and cover design and stuff, I did all of that myself, and I kind of like that process. It's another
Yeah.
sort of creative outlet or whatever. And you get to, I mean, kind of person that I would rather like fail on entirely my own merits than like put my fate in somebody else's hands and then fail. Um, so yeah. And then this, in terms of how the process has been, it's like, you know, having a podcasting platform definitely led to more sales. Probably
Right.
90% of the sales came because I've had two podcasts with pretty decent sized audience, and that's allowed me to come on shows like this and others and be able to promote it and talk about it. Um, I definitely think it's a good avenue for people to do. It's cool that the option is there, but for people who are going to get into it, it's like you have to not expect that you're actually going to sell any. Like
Right.
you have to have some kind of plan for how are you going to get this into people's hands, or how are you going to get people to know about this. Just having the book doesn't even really matter how good it is. Having the book by itself isn't going to, your friends will buy it maybe or whatever, but
Right.
the Amazon algorithm's not going to help you. They don't care. Um, and so that's been interesting. That's the next step beyond self-publishing, is learning how to try and sell it. And I've learned, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily good at it, but I have learned a little bit about how to do that.
Yeah, in terms of the marketing, that's the real thing there. With the marketing,
Yeah.
I mean, and it's brutal too. In the attention economy, it's brutal. So it's always
Mhm.
just like, yeah, how you're going to go about it and having that plan. I always joke
Mhm.
on the podcast too. It's like, yeah, I started the podcast to sell and get book deals essentially, like because you have like this
Right?
built-in, yeah, marketing
Yeah.
thing that you do, and
Hmm.
you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and every week you're kind of, yeah, promoting it and stuff, which is more than, let's say, all those grandfathered in writers are doing to promote their
Hell yeah, it
stuff.
is.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
you would think that, yeah, some of these publishers and agents would be clamoring to get the people that have a weekly advertisement for themselves and their writing, but they aren't.
That's that's what I thought. I have a novel that I finished last year, and I assumed that when I included in my cover letter or whatever, that like, hey, I happen to have a platform with X amount of downloads, and I don't want to
Right,
give a number away, but it's not insubstantial.
right.
I thought that that would be like, oh, interesting. Nobody gives a shit. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what those people are looking for. I've given up trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is crazy. That is crazy. All right, the last speed round here, Brad, is
Sure.
all craft stuff. So we like to ask, what is your
Okay.
writing routine like? How do you like to do your writing routine?
Yeah, 4:15 a.m. I
Whew.
get up and do my little prayer and meditation, which is probably not particularly interesting, but and then pretty quickly I'm at the keyboard, and I do that until roughly 7 a.m. That's pretty much the only on a given day, that's the only time that I really get to write. And then, every once in a while I can fit something else in later in the day or on the weekend or whatever. The podcast takes a lot of work now too, but
Right.
that's pretty much it. Just get and 2 hours a day or 2.5 hours a day is actually a lot. You can make some real progress with that kind of thing if you're
Yeah.
doing it every single day. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm a like I'm very painstaking. So I'm working on a novel right now. I've got maybe 150, 175, something like that pages drafted, and I tend to write the first third, and then I go back to the beginning, and I write to the middle, and I go back to the beginning, and I write to like three quarters, and then I go back to the beginning, and then I write it all the way through to the end, and then go back again, and then sort of do the final round of mostly small edits, hopefully. So I've kind of got that process figured out, but it takes place over a long period of time. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah.
like to
And there's a
t
couple,
no type
yeah, I was
handwrite? Yeah.
Yeah, typewritten, but revisions are mostly I print and then do hand
Yeah.
revisions, and then when I type it in, I'm making more revisions again, and then final round is r record myself reading the whole thing aloud, and then just listen to it over and over and over again, looking for little glitches in speech and stuff that doesn't seem as smooth as it could be, and whatever stuff that just kind of stands out, and then go back and kind of grind those little patches out.
Right.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Real,
fantastic. I mean,
yeah,
that
just
too, the momentum that you get from doing that every day too is a real benefit. So even if you have an off day, if you still have that time, you're still getting something out of it
yeah, yeah,
with
yeah.
those. Yeah. So that's what you say. What time do you usually go to bed to get up at 4:15?
Like 9:30, 10,
9:30?
something like
Yeah.
that. It's not,
Okay.
I'm probably, I'm generally sleep deprived, I would say, like overall.
Yes.
Every
Yeah.
once in a while, like once or twice a month, I have like a crash out sleep in, but that's pretty much it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The one we always like to ask as well is, how do you make a living? How do you make any money off the literature? Again, we don't need numbers or anything like that. You don't have to dox your profession, but
Yeah.
you have like weirdos calling them up to fire you. But
Yeah.
yeah, how do you make a living?
Yeah, my primary job is I'm a sewer engineer. So yeah, that's the main thing. I do that currently part-time. My wife and I are very fortunate that our financial situation has gotten really, really good. And I don't necessarily need to be working full time for us to have a full, happy, well taken care of life, which is really cool. At least for now, that could very well change any day.
Right.
So I'm just take advantage of that. I work every, I worked before you and I got on here. I worked for a few hours. So, that's the primary thing. Podcast is starting to make a little bit of money, which is
Okay.
cool. Yeah, and then, a couple other things. Read some tarot every once in a while. Not quite as much as I'd like, but that helps too. And yeah, making money off of books is I'm still in the red on House of Sleep. So
Right.
that's not a thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's the ones that have been grandfathered in are the only ones that are making money
Yeah.
off of those books.
Yeah.
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 We like to ask, reading anything good, watching anything good, listening to anything good. What's filling your head right now? This could
Yeah.
be anything, anything.
Best book I read recently, and there's a lot of good ones. Best Squim Bop Condition by David Leo Rice, incredible. Stay tuned on Method Madness. I've got an interview with him coming up. The other book that's coming out, I was fortunate enough to have read it in preprint. Andrew Edwards, uh, oh my God, I'm blank. Crowbar. His novel Crowbar comes out November 5th. I'm telling you, it is a fucking barn burner. It's awesome. Like everyone should read this book. If you like James Elroy, if you like conspiracies, if you like Cormac McCarthy, if you like, it's awesome. It's awesome. I'm gonna be talking more to him about it. Um, and the Golem by Gustav Meyrink is a recent book I read. I had a conversation with the boys on Getting Lit podcast about it. Incredible book. I haven't seen any movies recently that I liked. I saw One Battle After Another, and it was kind of meh. Wasn't bad. I'm not gonna shit talk it, but wasn't overwhelmed. I was whelmed by One Battle After
Yeah,
Another. It's been a while since I've seen a really good movie, I feel like. So
they
I
don't
don't have
make
much
them
going on there.
anymore. Yeah, they don't make good movies. I mean, whenever, even at Halloween, like I was looking through stuff on streamers and stuff, and I was
Yeah.
mostly like, yeah, anything. I started like literally just cutting off mentally, like anything that was came out like after 2014. I just was like,
Yeah.
this is going to be a shitty horror movie. So I was
Right.
going back to even my childhood stuff, like the 2006 like Hills Have Eyes or something. Like I was just going back
Yeah.
to those because they're just so much better made. Like
Yeah.
they give
Yeah.
you a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then
Right.
then
It's
and you
incredible,
have
right?
tension builders throughout, and you have like that
Yeah.
use that to make you scared, and like there's kind of
Right.
like, and now you just have like, oh my God, there's a ghost, like kind of, it's like, okay, like yeah, you need to make us feel scared here, like,
Yes.
and it's not
Yes.
just showing gore on screen, like that is not
Right.
inherently
That
scary.
doesn't
It's
do it.
hard to look at, but it doesn't
Right.
make you like scared. It makes you squirm a little bit to look at it.
Right.
I think of those like the Terrifier movies and stuff like that. Like,
I don't get this. I don't get the Terrifier movies.
dude,
I saw the
it's
first one. I don't get it.
gore, gore without the scare. Like that's what I would
Yeah.
describe it. It is gore without the horror. It is just
Hmm.
like shitty gore either. Like it's not even like good
Hmm.
looking gore. It's just like
Right.
shitty, hard to watch gore and no scare. Like you're not scared, you're just uncomfortable the whole time because it's
Mm.
so hard to look at like some of this horrific gore. So I don't understand why people praise it, but whatever. Like Halloween, I was taking my daughter, and so many people had like, yeah, Terrifier masks or
Oh,
whatever,
really?
Art the
Yeah.
Clown mask. I guess that's like the new Scream mask or something now. But
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. Brad Kelly, I've kept you long enough. This has been
Yeah.
fantastic.
No, I really enjoyed this. Yeah.
Please, where can people find you? Website, social media handles. It's all linked below as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, best thing is either my Twitter, just Brad Kelly, or my Substack, which is bradkelly-esque, esque.com. Website or podcast is at madmethodpod.com. Check that out. Everything shows up on Substack though, for sure. So hope to see you.
Fantastic. That's all linked below as well, listeners. Brad Kelly, please come back.
Will do. Yeah, we'll do this again. Absolutely.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile.
You know.
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Are you radioactive now?
Inner.
Resources. American resources.
Being bored?
Some activities are intentional, right?
It shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I
Heavy.
should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.